All right. Hey, what's up, guys? So I just finished watching Ziostorm vid about three fatal flaws, the unfortunate problem of Elden Ring PvP, and honestly, big shout out to Zio. Such a cool guy. He's doing such a great job with, bridging the gap between some of the broader audience that the game has and kind of getting them interested in PvP. And I mean, Zio reached out to me a couple of times, throughout the the years and whatnot, and he's such a cool guy. I can 110% vouch for him. Please check out his channel. I'll have a link to it in the description. So I wanted to talk about his vid here. We're not necessarily going to react to it. I just have bullet points that I want to talk about. Uh, what I like about this and why I got excited for it is that he's bringing a kind of a new perspective that a lot of us, like kind of hardcore PvPers, don't really have anymore. I don't know. I feel like every time I think about how we could, as a community, improve Elden Ring, we've been so deep into these games for so long that we always think of balance, 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 balance. Like everything, everything is about balancing the game for it to be rewarding for like skilled players and whatnot. But I really like some of these points he brings up here. It's not like everything is not necessarily new, but there's such an important one. The first point he brings up is about player incentive and kind of the lack of rewards that Elden Ring has for multiplayer or for PvP activities, whether it's the Coliseum and whatnot. So basically, you don't really get rewarded for the arena. You only get rewarded with Rune Arcs when you're invading or when you're dueling outside of the arena and whatnot. And I thought, we've talked about this a few times, but this is just such an important thing that the game could introduce that would really change the game upside down, because adding incentive to PvP kind of makes the wheel turn, in a sense that it's kind of our way to introduce players that are not necessarily involved as much into PvP to try things out, and it gives a more of an incentive for all the activities. It just feels more rewarding and more fun to be rewarded with something after you do an activity for like a sustained period of time. And what I like too is some of the comments that there is under the vid. Like, people have such cool suggestions. For me personally, some of them that I've noticed that I really liked were, somebody mentioned the Rune Arc shop. I know we've talked about this a few times, but it would be so amazing if in the Elden Ring DLC they could introduce some sort of Rune Arc shop where you spend Rune Arcs in order to buy rare materials, like rare materials like maybe Starlight Shards, Larval Tear, you name it, like fully upgrade like smithing stone, like ancient dragon smithing stone and stuff like that. Since it's a Rune Arc shop, it doesn't necessarily need to be like one Rune Arc for one ancient dragon smithing stone or whatever. It can be like, I don't know, 20 Rune Arc for an ancient smithing stone. The price for it could vary for sure, in relation to the rarity of the item. They could also like sell, I don't know, buff bundles there. So you get maybe a pack of like 20 bundles for one Rune Arc or something like that. Same thing with like the rare bolus that you can only acquire at once, like per playthrough, like the Madness bolus and the Rot bolus. There's just so much they could do, honestly, with that Rune Arc shop. Personally, I think it's such a great idea. The vendor could also sell sleep arrows, golem arrows, all the rare items that you kind of feel like you would need when you go in PvP that you can't really have access to unless you're duping or you're reloading your save or you're using CE to drop them. Like, all this stuff, I feel like it would be really good to let the players have access to it, but in a form of reward with the Rune Arc shop. I think like, for a community idea, I think this is one of the best community idea that has been suggested that would really incentivize people to keep playing. And obviously, if From Software decides to pour out more content, that would definitely incentivize players to stay around and to purchase whatever DLCs are planned for the future, if there's more than one, for instance. Another thing I want to talk about regarding rewards, because there's so many good ideas. One of my personal favorite, and it's something they started dabbling into Dark Souls 2. It's like weapon and armor shaders. I remember back in Dark Souls 2, at some point I got a black Murakumo, and it was like my favorite weapon just because it was a black Murakumo. It felt so cool. And I feel like it's such a simple thing for the player to be able to put a shader on the weapon or on an armor. That alone, like just a simple shader added on top of a weapon or an armor, could make such a unique and cool reward for various, situations. I think as far as a PvP reward, that could be amazing to have like some armor shaders or some weapon shaders, like a black claymore or a silver claymore or even a gold claymore. Obviously, we wouldn't want to go like fluorescent pink or the Call of Duty route where all the weapons look like toys and feel kind of out of the setting of the game. I don't think we want necessarily that, but there's just a lot of colors that would fit greatly within the Elden Ring color palette that would make for some amazing additions for customizing your character and your look, like making a steel armor kind of bronze, for instance. That would be kind of a cool shader, or vice versa, making a bronze armor kind of more steel looking. Black is also another good one. I feel like a lot of us would really enjoy having like a completely black character where the armor is very dark and whatnot. I mean, those are just cool things that don't necessarily take that much effort on the dev's part. These shaders, I mean, I guess they would have to introduce like the the shop and the Rune Arc shop and the way to be able to purchase them and whatnot. But at the same time, when it comes to like the type of content we would get out of it, it would be just amazing. It would feel so rewarding to get rewards like this for various activities. So another one that I thought was a very, very good idea, and this touches on the PvE side of the game. So I know when we talk about PvP rewards, right? Like incentive to do PvP, when we introduce all these cool ideas for rewards, like PvE players also want it. Like PvE players also want a taste of like these cool ideas, these weapon shaders, and have access to like golem arrows at the Rune Arc shop or sleep arrows and whatnot, because those are also cool items when you're actually playing the game. And one thing I read, it's not the first time I read this, but I read in one of the comments, someone mentioned the addition of some sort of a boss rush mode in the arena, or horde mode. This is something personally I've been thinking about for a long time. Before they announced the arena for the DLC, I thought it would have been like such a cool idea to have more of a PvE centered mode in the arena, where you have to fight like waves and waves of enemies, and it gets progressively harder. Kind of like, maybe that's not the best comparison, but it's the only thing that comes to my mind right now. Kind of like the zombie mode in Call of Duty, sorta. I mean, not really, but if you think about that and you get hordes and hordes of enemies, you don't really need to absolutely be online to participate in something like this, and this sort of activity could reward you with the same currency or rune arcs and whatnot that could be used to have access to all the rewarded items from doing PvP. So like the people that just want to play online and have fun in PvP could be rewarded with the Rune Arc, and then they spend it at the Rune Arc shop for various rewards and whatnot. And then if you are playing offline, for instance, well, maybe you could have access still to this this nice horde mode where you can fight waves of enemies and be rewarded for the same thing as if you were doing PvP. And at the same, like for each wave of enemies defeated, for instance, so like first wave, maybe a bunch of basic undeads and whatnot. Then second wave, it's a bunch of dogs, you name it. Third wave, it's a mix and that in between, and like cavalier and whatnot. There's a lot of things you can do with this. I'm just throwing out ideas that I think are super exciting. Like, I'm just imagining all of this in my head, and I'm like, wow, that would be so much fun. And personally, I would be, as a big PvP guy, I would be a huge fan of some sort of horde mode or boss rush mode where you have to fight a lot of PvE enemies like as waves or like one after the other after the other. And I think it would be also a very fun co-op activity. I think we're still lacking in the department of co-op activity. Right now, the Coliseum introduced 2v2s and 3v3s, which are extremely fun. I think they're the most fun activity at the moment that the game has to offer. But this would introduce like an other kind of co-op activity that we could do, like have you and your partner or your buddy just sit there and try to survive as many horde waves of enemies as you can. And I think that would just be amazing. That would just be so much fun. And that brings us to the next point I want to talk about, which is arena maps. So a little bit ago, we made a vid showcasing or suggesting a few different arenas that could be really fun for PvP in Elden Ring, whether it's a small arena for duel, whether it's interesting areas with verticality for team fights, such as the Undead Catacomb, for instance. This place would be so much fun for an arena map. Or whether it's something like Gatefront Ruins, where the whole space is kind of intricate enough to be like dynamic for team fights, as well as this could be an amazing arena for, or an amazing map to host something like a horde mode of some sort, where the waves of enemy come and go, but it's not just a flat ground where you just AoE the entire arena to deal with the waves of enemy. Having a bunch of items all around like this would definitely make a mode like a horde mode much more interesting, in my opinion. So I do think they have to introduce more arena maps in the future. It's just a matter of what do they decide to bring. I think they definitely need to bring some maps with cover that would make things a lot more interesting. But there's just so many cool ideas that are possible, that is really untapped potential that Elden Ring could have access to with just just the right guidance, because a DLC could change the game so much in a good way, in a positive way, so that it can be enjoyed for years and years and years to come. Also, another point that Zio brings up is horse combat, PvP horse combat. He would like to see like a dedicated PvP horse combat mode. Personally, I'm not a big fan of horse combat in Elden Ring. I think the idea of horse combat is a good idea, but I think that horse combat would need to be more fleshed out, as I think the horse combat is a bit too basic in Elden Ring. It serves the purpose for the PvE, but I don't think it would serve a purpose in the PvP, as I don't think it has enough thought put into it to be transferred into PvP, which is why I think it was not. I think that's the main reason why they did not want to mix in horse combat with PvP. I think the horse combat is not fleshed out enough at the moment. Perhaps in a future From Software game with a similar setting to Elden Ring, maybe they could introduce horse combat with PvP. I think I'm not against the idea at all. I think it would be a cool idea if implemented properly, but I think as of right now, I don't think the horse combat is sophisticated enough to kind of give the player a nice PvP experience out of horse combat fighting. With that said, though, let's go to the final point that Zio brings up in his vid, and he talks about that we lost our ability to do fight clubs, which unfortunately is very true. We can't do fight clubs anymore in Elden Ring. Personally, I got over it. Unfortunately, I kind of accepted that we can't do fight clubs anymore. But it would be really nice if they could add something similar in the arena. Like, I think what would be similar is some sort of spectator mode where, like, you bring in, like, I don't know, like 6 players and whatnot, and instead of having all 6 players be in the arena, you get 2 that fight, and then you get like the other players that spectate, and you have this sort of rotation between players for a specific amount of time. I think that could be interesting to kind of bring fight clubs to light, and also having this sort of spectator mode in the arena could also open up a lot of possibilities for maybe more competitive setting for the arena. And what I mean by that, if we were to host a tournament in the arena, it would be a lot more simple to have some sort of spectator mode in order to stream an event or showcase an event or something like this. We've always had this in the form of Fight Club, where you summon both combatant, the arbiter or the host signals when the fight starts, and then both combatant abide by those rules and just go ham from there. I think if it was integrated into the game, that would actually push the competitive scene a lot further, which is not necessarily something everyone is interested in, but in a sense, you know, a spectator mode is something I think everyone could benefit from, just for the community factor of reintroducing fight clubs to the game. So these are all the things I wanted to say. Big shout out to Zio. His vid was so interesting that it made me want to talk about it more, and I had so many things to say that I wanted to make it a video on my own. So really good content. Big shout out to Zio. I hope you guys have a happy 2023 again. I'll catch you guys up next time. Take it easy, everyone.